Alrighty, everybody. Thank you for joining us for all of these games. This is a Battle of Titans. We're in game number 5 between Boston Schatteman and Dominic Harvey, both playing Selesnya lands. Boston took a pretty decent time taking games 1 and 2, and Dom just really rushing games 3 and 4, getting those done nice and quickly. So here we are in game number 5. We're going to see both players keep their 7s. Boston's going to start off with a Savannah into Exploration. Gonna follow it up with a Yavimaya into an Elvish Reclaimer. What do you think of this start, Jarvis?
It's very close to the absolute nuts. It's hard to have a better hand than this. First off, you're not exposed to Force of Vigor. Some of the hands you have that look this explosive are exposed to Force of Vigor. But this one is protected because, Dom can sacrifice 2 cards to kill the Exploration, which is worth doing sometimes. But he'll only get, basically it's a reverse 2 for 1 in Boston's favor if that happens.
Mm-hmm. So if we take a closer look at Dom's hand, looks like the only sources of mana in there is an Urza Saga, a Boseiju, and a Mox Diamond. And even if he does use the acceleration from the Mox Diamond, he's kind of very, very land light, right? So he'll... It really kind of gauges on, does Boston have one of the sideboard pieces or some sort of interaction to kind of interact with this Life from the Loam, right? So I would probably say like an ideal play from Dom's side is like Urza Saga into Mox Diamond to kind of cast Life from the Loam to get the Boseiju back to ensure that you have that land drop. But what do you think of Dom's opening hand here?
Well, it's definitely a keep. But the play you described, it just walks into the Reclaimer just bogging your loam. So I don't think that's really wise. I think what Dom's trying to figure out is, okay, I could actually kill the Exploration this turn by playing Mox Diamond, discarding, say, Urza Saga or Boseiju, playing Haywire Might, playing my last card out, and just killing the Exploration with the Haywire Might immediately.
Is there any situation where we just don't go the Mox Diamond route? We just go like Boseiju to Exploration into Urza Saga?
That's reasonable. I mean, you could theoretically do that. The problem with that, I think, is you want to have 2 green sources if possible, because then Wasteland could just cut you off of 1 green source if you don't do that. But I think Dom's really just thinking it through because it's kind of complicated. If Dom had another land, this is less complicated, I think.
Yeah, top decking that Soulguide Lantern really doesn't help him here. Alright, let's see if he comes to a decision here. Okay, starts off with an Urza Saga. Looks like he is going to go with the Mox Diamond route. Going to discard that Boseiju. Does go for the Life from the Loam. Returns the Boseiju to the hand.
Okay, so I guess Dom does value forcing the bog out immediately. It's really hard not to bog the Loam here, I think.
Yeah, so Boston's going to draw a Swords to Plowshares for his turn. Does have Lush Portico, Wasteland, and Caracas in hand. So this is like, what do you think are going through the players' minds at this point?
So from Boston's side, he knows that Dom knows that the bog can just eat the loam immediately. So theoretically, what you're saying is, okay, how important is this loam actually to Dom? Can I do something better this turn? The real problem is we just have 3 lands in hand. One of them is Lush Portico, so you would get some surveil value. I think if you're going to get the bog, you should bog first, because that you have to shuffle your deck first off the Reclaimer, then use the Lush Portico to surveil 1 after that. Alternatively, this also makes sense.
All right,
so you do this.
Sorry. Boston Wastelands, the Urza Saga is what Jarvis is referring to. Now he's gonna Bojuka Bog, the Urza Saga, and the Life from the Loam. So what kind of position does this put Dom in?
So it's actually not unsalvageable, but the really best draws in Dom's deck are either more copies of Life from the Loam, or even just like more engine lands of some sort, whether it be Wasteland or Urza Saga. Basically, the worst draws possible, I think, would be excess Mox Diamonds or crop rotations here.
All right, so Boston following up with the Lush Portigo, gonna surveil, dumps a Swords to Plowshares into the graveyard. Dom gonna take his turn, draw a forest, and go straight into the main phase. So he did draw land, but not one of those engine lands that you were referring to.
Mm-hmm.
All right, is he going for the exploration? Gonna play the Boseiju and the forest, so no lands in hand. Going to follow it up with a Soul Guide Lantern, going to exile the Wasteland. Does he follow it up with Haywire Might? I don't see any reason to, right? You want to keep it up for like crop rotation?
Well, that, and also if you played the Haywire Might out and Boston has Force of Vigor, like hard cast, is kind of a disaster. Because I think the targets would be probably the Haywire Might and Soul Guide Lantern by that point, which would just force the issue. Or even you could theoretically go after the exploration as well. With one of Dom's loams gone, I'm not sure how necessary that is. I think this game will be decided by who gets like a recursion engine going first, most likely, but both of them have exploration currently, but neither of them has the Life from the Loam or Crucible of Worlds to break it open.
Yeah, so we're gonna see Boston draw for his turn. He does find his Soul Guide Lantern off the top. Gonna play a Caracas and then just pass it to Dom. Dom going to crack the Soul Guide Lantern. Gonna draw an Elvish Reclaimer. Going to untap, draw for his turn, finds a Surgical Extraction. Don't think that's too useful here at the moment.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing. I think one of the differences between Dom's deck and Boston's deck is Boston doesn't have Surgical. So that means in a long enough game, if Dom were to somehow Surgical one of the key lands or the Loam, that gives him a huge advantage, actually.
Okay, so do you want to talk about maybe like the prime targets for Surgical Extraction?
I think it's a very tactical card. Pun intended, I use it surgically, not like strategically. There are times where you're going to want a Surgical Wasteland. There are times where you're obviously wanting a Surgical Loam. I guess here he's thinking about surgicaling something.
Oh, okay. It can't be the Yavimaya, right? I think he's going for that Swords to Plowshares.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting play. That's not something that was on my radar, but obviously, actually getting a Swords from Boston's hand is huge. Normally, the disadvantage of Surgical is it doesn't affect your opponent's board or hand, right? But here, it actually gets a card from Boston as well.
Yeah, this allows Dom to get a little bit more information to see exactly what Boston sideboarded, how his deck is configured now. He does have all of the information that there's only a Soul Guide Lantern left in Boston's hand. But yeah, I'm surprised that he fired off the Surgical like right now.
So I think the reason Dom actually did that was he just drew Elvish Reclaimer for turn. So he wanted to make sure that the coast was clear so it wouldn't get Swords to Plowshared. Because it would make sense for Boston to be holding on to a plow because there was no target for the plow yet.
Interesting. Okay.
Again, this is a very tactical play. This is not a strategic play. Because also you can see that Boston only had 2 plows in the deck, so this is not going to be a long-term, oh, I've like knocked out a key part of your deck.
Yeah.
It just sort of protects the Reclaimer for a little bit.
Okay, so hopefully they update their life totals here. I'm pretty sure Dom used the Phyrexian life, so he should be at 18. So we're going to see Boston activate the Elvish Reclaimer, going to sacrifice the Bojuka Bog. And yep, they've updated the life totals. I assume that he's going to go for like another Lush Portigo, or is an Urza Saga. Yeah, obviously the Urza Saga probably better.
So interestingly enough, Haywire Might can exile the Saga.
Yes.
But he's reconsidering that for that reason, I think.
But is there... Oh, he's thinking about Wasteland. Is there any reason to kind of force Dom to, like, kind of force his hand to use that Haywire Might? Or is
I
it
don't think
he's
so.
just so far behind in terms of like card resources?
Well, it's not even that. I think if you force Dom to use it this turn, basically that lets him use the mana he was going to waste anyways. Because it's clear that he doesn't want to kill the exploration right now. I think even if Boston draws a Loam and puts Loam in the stack, Dom can simply respond by killing the exploration then.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like he's really heavily considering the Wasteland and the Urza Saga. It looks like he decides to go with the Wasteland. So both players both have one card in hand. I think this is a first throughout this entire series where both players have had like limited resources in hand. Because typically Boston, he's very careful when he's playing cards. Like he always typically has more cards in his hand than his opponent. So he's like, especially when it comes to like the Delver or the blue decks, he's always very key to try to leverage the amount of cards he's using to deal with the threats that are being, proposed against him. Yeah, or it's rare to see him with so few cards in hand. Is just where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different here. Like as opposed to a blue mirror here, the only card that usually is held in hand is either Force of Vigor or Crop Rotation. So a lot of the cards just tend to get played out a lot faster.
Yeah, I guess Exploration is a really good card at emptying your hand when the majority of your deck is lands. All right, Boston finds a Wooded Foothills off of the top of the deck, plays it for his land for the turn. After playing a Soul Guide Lantern, exiling I think it was what did he exile from?
Soul Guide Lantern.
It was a Soul Guide Lantern. Okay.
Yeah. It's ordinary border versus old border.
All right, so Dom does find the Life from the Loam before Boston does, but no targets.
So I think what we actually might see happen here is Dom might force the issue in that Soul Guide. It does give Boston a card because he'll just sacrifice it in response, obviously, to draw a card. But then that means your Loam is not contested by the Soul Guide Lantern.
Okay, so it looks like Boston is cracking a Wooded Foothills at the end of Dom's turn. With the Surveil trigger on the stack, he is going to activate the Elvish Reclaimer, sacrificing the Lush Portico that he just found.
Nice play.
Yeah. So so for those of you following at home, the Surveil trigger is still in stack, but he does get to find another land.
This is a good queen sequencing.
Looks like he is... Sorry, yep, go on.
Sorry, I'm just thinking about what he could go get here. Again, the options are kind of weird. The Haywire might really makes things complicated.
Looks like he's really contemplating that this main stage. But this is why I was wondering if it was just a kind of time to kind of force the issue. But as you said before, really no point in doing that. So Boston going to settle for the Thespian stage, and he's going to see what he surveils.
So I actually think this makes a lot of sense, because suppose on next turn Boston decides to search for Saga, and then Dom tries to kill it, then he can stage the Saga in response. So I think this is actually good planning.
Yes, this is nice, very nice future proofing. All right, here's the Surveil, sees a Crop Rotation. Now, if this were you, where would you be throwing this Crop Rotation?
I probably would keep it. It's just nice insurance versus opposing Wastelands. Even versus the Haywire Might, it's kind of nice, because suppose you go get the Saga, and all of that happens, you could Crop Rotate away. I think you'll be one mana short of doing literally everything, but it is a nice option to have.
Yeah, so Boston agrees. He does draw that Crop Rotation, and as you said, Crop Rotation very much acts like a counterspell in this matchup. And hopefully we see the power, because Dom has been holding his Crop Rotation for quite some time now. I think it was in his opening hand. I guess the difference is Dom is facing down a Wasteland, so he is waiting for just an opportune moment.
I think Dom's really thinking about cracking that Soul Guide Lantern with the Haywire Might.
Yeah, if he can go after it, he can freely Life from the Loam, right? All right, here's a Haywire Might activation. Gonna go after the Soul Guide Lantern, just as you said. Gonna bring him back up to 20 points of life against Boston's 19. All right, so Boston going to float.
No, he's drawing a card, I think.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So one really nice thing about this from Dom's perspective is even if Boston goes and gets the Saga now, he cannot copy it with the stage immediately because 1 mana has been spent to crack the Soul Guide Lantern.
I see. Okay, so after all of that's resolved, Boston draws a Windswept Teeth off of the cracked Soul Guide Lantern. Dom is just gonna finish off his turn with an Elvish Reclaimer, sacrificing the Beseiju, and we're gonna see what land he tries to go for. But this does open him up to Wasteland, does it not?
It does, but I think that's fine with the Loam in hand.
Ah, okay.
Like, so it's sort of incentivizing Boston to waste here as well. Because wasting the waste is generally like you take away your options from your opponent if you do that. Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is good queen play. I call this Paulo's rule because Paulo first proposed the idea that if you're going to do something, you should just limit their options immediately. And the wasteland being tapped obviously makes sense to limit that option.
Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna draw a Wasteland for his turn.
So a really interesting thing to think about here is Dom actually has all of Boston's graveyard hate covered now, I believe, except for Endurance. Because the Bajuka Bog's in the graveyard and the Soul Guide Lantern's also in the graveyard.
Mm-hmm.
So if you Bajuka Bog the Bajuka Bog, you can theoretically set up looping bogs to make sure they have nothing in graveyard. I don't know if that's where the game's going to go, but it kind of looks like Dom's considering it anyways.
Yeah, I'm just I don't like Dom hasn't used his Bajuka Bog yet, right?
Correct. That's why I think it's kind of interesting if the game goes that route.
Yeah. Okay. So it looks like Boston is deep in the tank. I wonder what do you think he could be thinking about here? Because
So
Dom is targeting a Beseiju and a Wasteland in his graveyard with this Life from the Loam.
So I think one might. I'm not sure. I don't think there's anything. I don't think he can actually do anything productive with his Reclaimer or Crop Rotation. So I'm not sure. Yeah, in fact, he just lets it go.
All right, so Dom gets back a Wasteland and a Beseiju. So doesn't this allow Dom? Is it productive to just start wastelanding all of Boston's resources, or?
So I would wait for Boston to tap the Reclaimer before Wastelanding, if possible. If that doesn't happen, then you could like Wasteland on upkeep or something like that.
Okay.
And yeah, I think Dom just said go, which means he understands that just wasting now is not that good because it's sort of a net neutral exchange.
Mm-hmm. It also allows him to Elvish Reclaimer if he needs it, right?
Exactly, yeah. I think what's going to happen is if Dom gets to use that loom a bunch of times, eventually the exploration will be Boseju'd. Eventually, all of Boston's lands will be wastelanded, and then we'll be left with like Reclaimer versus Dom having a full grip. I'm not sure that'll happen really right away, but if Boston doesn't draw anything good, it is not going to be a pretty sight for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is where Lady Luck comes into play, right?
Mm-hmm. I think this is one of the iconic things about lands that most people associate with the deck, the Wasteland Lock.
Yeah.
It is obviously very powerful versus decks that have basically almost all non-basic lands. There's only a Singleton Forest in both these decks.
Man, Boston deep in the tank. So what are the lines that he's considering right now?
I'm not sure. Like it's kind of a tough situation. Um, if you tap the Reclaimer, then two of your lands get wastelanded.
Looks like he's gonna go for it. Nope, still thinking.
I think basically I just would not tap the Reclaimer is what I would do, and just like hope to draw Endurance or something to get out of the situation.
So, what I'm hearing is that endurance is probably the best and only way out of this, or is there something else that he might be able to draw? Because we know, like,
Mm-hmm.
he.
Yeah, it kind of feels that way to me, but obviously, like, it's just really hard when most of your graveyard hate that's tutorable is accounted for.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna see Boston activate this Elvish Reclaimer. He is gonna sacrifice the Karakas. Looks like he's considering a Wasteland and an Urza Saga. He opts to go for the Wasteland, though. But this kind of, like, for me, this kind of feels like a losing battle, right? Like, Boston hasn't found his his engine to kind of get these things back, whereas Dom has. So I don't know how effective this is going to be.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if Dom will just waste right now. Whoa, he didn't. That's interesting. So that screams to me Dom's intention to leave up Bajuka Bog to cut off Loam.
Interesting. All right,
So like basically I said you should do things if they're forced plays. Wasting the lands there is not a forced play because you want to leave a Reclaimer.
All right, so Boston gonna cast the Sylvan Library that he just drew for the turn after playing a Windswept Teeth. So now he's only left with the crop rotation in hand, but he does now have a way to see more cards to help him find those engine pieces.
That might actually be the second best draw in Boston's deck besides Endurance.
And I don't know, is this like a tough position? Like, Dom does have that Beseju in hand, and Boston is aware of it.
Also, Ghost Quarter was flipped over, so we can start going after the forest if it's ever searched up.
Yeah. So Dom does dredge back that light from the loam. It is in his hand again. He does mill another surgical extraction, Elvish Reclaimer, and the Ghost Quarter that you mentioned. This is. I feel like. This is where my inexperience is showing. I have no idea who is advantaged here. Do you want to give any insights?
I think it's a little bit more complicated now because of the Sylvan Library. Before the Sylvan, I think Dom would have been squarely ahead, but Sylvan does allow Dom to find a bunch of, it allows Boston to find a bunch of cards he might need. In conjunction with the fetch land as well, like letting you only take the minimum amount of damage for cards you want.
Yeah, so this is like the epitome of utilizing your life as a resource, right?
Right.
All right, so we're gonna see Dom activate his Wasteland, going to sacrifice it, and he. Did you get a glimpse of what he targeted?
Yeah,
Did he target the opposing Wasteland?
You have to, I think. If you target stage, Boston simply fetches and copies your forest, and targeting the fetch land makes no sense. And targeting one of the tapped sources doesn't make a lot of sense either. I think wasting the waste makes the most sense. Because now consider if Boston decides to waste back, you waste again, and then Boston gets to use the Reclaimer, but he might just end up using the Reclaimer instead.
All right, here we go. Going to activate the Elvish Reclaimer, sacrifice the targeted Wasteland, going to turn it into another land.
And the reason Dom's doing this is because of the Life of Moment in hand. He actually wants to get 3 lands in graveyard. If you Wasteland again, that'll be Waste, Ghost Quarter in graveyard to loan back. And then you will have 3 land destruction spells with basically Boston tapped out.
Yeah, which is almost like an ideal situation for lands.
Right. Yep.
All right. So Boston is gonna fetch out another Wasteland from this Elvish Reclaimer. He is settling on it.
You might not see Dom fire off all those wastelands because of the risk that of Boston drawing a Life from the Loam if you don't leave up your Reclaimer. So that's the one reason you might not see it happen.
Yeah, I mean, if Dom does wasteland the wasteland now, he can Life from the Loam and get back 2 wastelands to the Ghost Quarter, and he does have 2 land drops. He hasn't made a land drop for his turn.
Right.
The only downside for that, I think, is he will no longer have green sources if he wants to Besage you something.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how he pursues it. I could actually see Dom actually loaning back only 2 lands, playing the lands out, and Bosageing the Sylvan Library.
Okay. Yeah, because that's basically the thing that's keeping Boston in the game, right?
Right. Like, so you go Shields down 1 turn. If Boston draws Loam, at that point it's kind of a disaster because then he'll get the Bajuka Bog back. So that's why Dom might be hesitant to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And conceivably, he could have the Loam in his hand, and he just didn't want to cast Loam into the Reclaimer activating for Bajuka Bog.
Yeah, there's a lot of intricate play being. There's a lot of intricate play here. I think because these players know each other so well, it kind of makes it a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you play a lot with someone, you'll know how they like think about the game, their tendencies or predilections.
Yeah.
You know.
All right, so Dom deep in the tank here, considering on using this wasteland.
I think he was considering tapping it for mana to cast Life from the Loam, really, more than anything else. Okay.
All right, looks like he's committing to the Life from the Loam. Nope. All right. There's so many lines of play here.
Yeah, it's fairly complicated. I think the Sylvan Library throws a big wrench in the decision making.
All right. Looks like Dom is committing to wastelanding the wasteland, going to cast Life from the Loam, return all 3 back. So wasteland, Ghost Quarter, Besage, crop rotation for Dom's hand. Going to play that wasteland and the Ghost Quarter.
I think we're actually just going to see Dom pass. Yeah, I like this. I hadn't actually considered this. You can just leave up the Bog again this turn. Basically, I hadn't considered just wastelanding once only, and then loaming back all of the things.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to see the power of Sylvan Library here. Boston going to draw Urza Saga, Crop Rotation, Elvish Reclaimer. What do you think of these 3 cards?
Those are fine. I think the Saga and Rotation are pretty good, and it's debatable if you want the Reclaimer, but I guess also you're not really getting killed, so you could also just pay 8 and just deploy all of them.
Yeah. But this doesn't help the current situation, does it? I mean, I guess the Urza Saga is a great help, and the crop rotations are like pretty decent, so you don't have to rely on the Elvish Reclaimer so much if Dom is gonna continue wastelanding.
Right. It being 1 mana instead of 2 to like effectively counterspell Wasteland is kind of nice.
Yeah, so okay. After dropping an Urza Saga, we're gonna just see Boston pass the turn to Dom. Dom going to dredge back Life from the Loam, gonna mill, crop rotation, Elvish Reclaimer, finds himself in Urza Saga. Going to play the wasteland that we all know about. And looks like he's gonna just fire it off on the Urza Saga.
It makes sense to me. Like, I think you just want to stop him from getting any sort of board presence whatsoever, because given long enough time, the Loam engine will overpower this game completely.
But okay, so with that being said, I would also do anything that I can to get this Sylvan Library off the board. because that's kind of what's
Mhm.
giving Boston the traction.
I think you might see that this turn, mostly because you can channel the Boseiju as well on the Sylvan, and then cast Light from the Loam with your last 2 lands, and replay 2 lands and leave up the Reclaimer activation.
Well, he's already used 1 land drop on one of the wastelands.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so then I guess you can't.
Alright, so in response to the wasteland activation, Boston going to activate this Reclaimer one more time, getting rid of the wasteland target Urza Saga. Gonna try to turn it into something else. Looks like he's gonna go for a stage. So
well, I was about to say, one nice thing about having stages of your own is if Dom ever plays out a saga, you can just start copying them that way.
mhm.
And it's still kind of nice. Like, so it's sometimes dangerous to play your saga out if you're not ready to deal with all of the opposing sagas, you know? Like the stage sagas, essentially.
So would Urza Saga be the primary target for Boston's Thespian stage, or is it a very situational, like corner case target that you would need to pick?
I think in this situation it would be. Like, there's not really anything good to copy except for you could copy opposing wastelands to force the issue. Copying Saga gets you somewhere in a long enough game as well. So yes, generally it would be Saga in this case.
All right, we're gonna see Dom commit to another Life from the Loam. I assume that he's targeting. I don't remember what the. Oh, it's the Urza Saga.
Mm-hmm.
So he returns Urza Saga Wasteland to his hand. I assume he's gonna play the Urza Saga.
Well, I don't think so because of the opposing stage.
Oh, true. Yep, you called it. There's the Wasteland for his second land drop.
So I really like how Dom's playing this. He's playing this basically as patiently as possible, saying, even with Sylvan Library, I think the Loam engine is going to dominate you because it is basically unbounded card draw as opposed to card draw that's bounded by life total. But look, Boston's found the endurance, so that is going to break all of this up now.
Yeah, so Boston from the Sylvan Library finds Urza Saga, Thespian Stage, and the endurance that we were talking about, and that you were gauging very early on in this game as a way for Boston to get back into this game, just as a way to deal with the Life from the Loam engine that he's been, having to deal with these past few turns. But are we going to see Boston take just one card, or are we going to see him take maybe multiple?
That's an interesting question. Since Boston has no lands, I think we'll see at least one, if not all. Oh, like one extra card, if not both extra cards. I think going to 3 is fairly okay, honestly. But the real problem with going to 3 is you can't take extra cards from Sylvan Library for the rest of the game. I don't think the actual life total aspect of it matters very much.
Yeah, I guess it's weighing like is the Thespian Stage, because it's probably like the weakest card out of the 3, right? So we'll say, for example, is the Thespian Stage really worth that 4 extra life, or is it probably better to save the 4 extra life for a better card down the road? Because we know that Boston does have 2 endurances sideboarded in.
Right. So he decides the Thespian Stage is worth it.
Okay. Yeah, I guess in the face of double wastelands, he doesn't want to keep losing Urza Sagas if he doesn't need to. Especially if he's constantly rotating his lands into something else with the Elvish Reclaimer and the double crop rotation that he has. But do you want to maybe give some insight on how drastically changed this game is now that Boston does have that endurance?
I think with the endurance, he can shut off the Loam when he feels the time is appropriate to do so. You have to do it before Dom actually dredges the Loam to shuffle the Loam back in. And yeah, like one thing that would prevent that is like a random trinket lying around. One way you can stop endurance on Loam is to have like a Soul Guide Lantern's draw ability lying around, or like something of that nature, like Horizon Canopy, is sometimes played. But I think besides the Soul-Guide Lantern, neither of these players have something like that, really.
Yeah, that's kind of like an old school play, right? That's why
Mhm.
older decks would use is it Tranquil Thicket? The
Well,
green.
Tranquil Thicket's a lot more powerful because it doesn't use their land drop.
Yeah.
Like Horizon Canopy is worse than Tranquil Thicket, except it is a dual land for this deck.
Hmm.
It is a trick that basically Tranquil Thicket has been power crept out, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just equating it to like any sort
Yeah.
of instant speed draw is
Sure.
really how, because that's typically how a Lance player would try to get around like something like a surgical, right? If
Right.
someone tries to surgical the life from the loam, then the instant speed draw really helps because it gets rid of the target and it just
Mhm.
fizzles the surgical extraction. But
Mhm.
yeah, we're gonna have to see how Boston utilizes this endurance. He has exhausted what three of his own wastelands? No, all four of his wastelands are gone. So he does need to find
Mhm.
some sort of recursion quickly.
Yeah, that's like theoretically something else you could do, which is use endurance to shuffle your lands back into your deck. That does make any life from the loam you top deck not very good,
Mhm.
but theoretically you could do that.
I mean, I guess if he's settling in to play the really really long game, it seems like that's kind of how he's situated himself.
Mhm.
Because he's practically just been waiting for any sort of graveyard recursion, right? I think that's
Right.
the piece that's really been putting him behind Dom. Like Dom found that life from the loam pretty early, and it's just what's been pushing him so far ahead.
He's really taking his time here, huh?
Yeah, this is one of the big problems with untimed best of fives.
Yeah.
Looks like he's not going to do anything, just going to play the Thespian stage and pass the turn. So is this Elvish Reclaimer? I guess it's just not important, right? Because it's been sitting in his hand for like a couple turns. He could have played the last turn, and he could play it this turn, but decides not to.
Yeah, I think the realization is boss like you don't have enough green sources to leave up everything if you cast a reclaimer essentially.
Mhm.
And I don't think a second reclaimer meaningfully does anything. Like the most important card to search for has been searched for, which is Bojuka Bog.
Yeah, I guess other than Life from Loam, if you do decide to endurance yourself, that is a way to get Bajuka Bog back
Mhm.
into your deck.
Right.
I mean, is that a line of play here? Is that, oh, Dom's gonna go for a Bajuka Bog for himself?
So yeah, we'll see if the endurance self bog Dom comes up. Yeah, I've seen
So
that happen a few times. I'm not sure if it'll happen here. We'll really let's just see what happens.
I would like to get your opinion though. Is like because like you've kind of led towards, or you said you described the Bajuka Bog loops a couple times throughout this
Mhm.
match, and I want to kind of weigh its importance here. So this is kind of a critical decision for Boston, right? It's like, if is he gonna endurance himself to kind of keep his own Bajuka Bog? Because if he does, he can search for the Bajuka Bog with the Elvish Reclaimer and then Bog Dom, right?
Mhm.
Like Dom's Life from the Loam is in the graveyard. He is kind of shields down, no? He has
Mhm.
really no way of protecting himself from the Bajuka Bog. If that's not the play, then the play is to save this endurance to kind of deal with Dom's graveyard, and it's almost like the same result anyway.
Yeah, I think when you put it in that framing, I think it actually probably is the correct play to endurance yourself and bog Dom. Um, it also basically gives you back all of your wastelands and stuff back into your deck. And
Yeah, it also shuffles
well,
back the Soul Guide Lantern, so it gives him another piece
exactly, yeah.
of graveyard hate.
I think it probably is the correct play, but Boston is just really taking his time to figure it out.
All right, looks like he's committing to a line. Here he
Okay,
goes.
so actually, I think what he's doing is saying, I'm holding priority with the Sage stack and the sack, and then Endurance myself, which is a very clean play. This is you have to play a lot of Magic to see a play like that.
Okay, yeah. So for viewers at home, Boston has activated Elvish Reclaimer, sacrificed one of the lands. In response to his own, he's holding the priority to hard cast this Endurance, shuffle in his graveyard. That way he can search for the Bajuka Bog that he's shuffled into, and that gives him a very clean shuffle for his deck. That means not his lands aren't just kind of stranded at the bottom of his library. So now Boston has a fresh no graveyard. So although Life in the Loam is kind of irrelevant here, he has also dealt with Dom's Life from the Loam at his graveyard.
Yeah, and that stuff is gone. It's just 100% gone because it's in the exile zone. Whereas all Boston stuff can be re-accessed given enough time via Elvish Reclaimer.
Yeah, so we're gonna see Dom. He top decked a Lush Portigo. He surveilled, put a Maze of Ith into the graveyard. Going to play an Urza's Saga to follow it up. And only a Boseiju and a crop rotation left in hand. So what? How do you think the advantage meter should be looking now?
Well, now it's in Boston's. It's heavily in Boston's favor now because I think with the Sylvan plus Reclaimer for like infinite shuffles, he'll basically find a loam and also rebuild his graveyard to be threatening to Dom like pretty quickly.
Yeah, and Dom's I don't remember exactly what he lost, but he has lost a lot to that Bajuka Bog, right?
Mm-hmm.
He still does have his wastelands though. Although Dom has put out that Urza Saga, and now Boston can use those Thespian stages.
So yeah, we eventually have decided that we should kill the Sylvan. I'm not sure if it's too late or not. It may not be too late still for this to be a good play.
Mm-hmm. And you know, Boseiju is fair. Boston does get to find a land with a basic land type after losing the Sylvan Library. So he's going to find a Lush Portigo, which is going to allow him to see the top card of his deck and whether or not he wants to keep it.
Yeah, I think priority card number 1 would be Life from the Loam, honestly.
All right, let's see. Finds a third crop rotation off of the Surveil. Is he going to keep it? Is crop rotation just too good? Yeah, I think it's too good.
I think the reason it's too good is it just makes the wastelands like kind of ineffectual, and you know there are more shuffle effects for your Sylvan Library if necessary.
Yeah, and now that he has access to all of the lands that he burnt through early on in the game, he just has so many more options now. Even though those options are, just wastelands and an Urza Saga. All right, gonna go to combat. This is the first attack of the game. Swinging with Endurance.
Well, you could theoretically just block and activate your Reclaimer, but I also think 3 damage probably doesn't matter very much to Dom right now.
Yeah, so Dom going to go down to 17 against Boston 7. All right, Boston back in the tank. Does have a lot of options. He basically has 4 crop rotation abilities. All right. Going to cast a second Elvish Reclaimer.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. Dom not having any endurances in the sideboard definitely does make it easier for Boston to play against Dom. And you just kind of saw how impactful the endurance was there right then for Boston.
Yeah. So Dom going to activate the Elvish Reclaimer, sacrifices the Bajuka Bog, finds himself in Urza Saga. All right. So if you have the deck list open, who has in total who would have more graveyard hate? Is it Dom or is it Boston?
It's Boston because of no. It actually, I think it's a tie.
It's just the different. It's different pieces, right? Like Boston has the
Right.
endurances, whereas Dom has those surgicals.
Right. One thing to note is Dom actually has 4 reclaimers to Boston's 2 postboard, so technically that's more. But once the bog is used, it no longer is a graveyard hate card.
Yeah. All right, so we're gonna see. I assume Boston floating a black mana here
Yep.
to cast a Croak rotation. Going to turn it into considering a wasteland. I guess there's no other lands to really consider here, right? Because I think Boston really needs to deal with the wastelands before he can start going for his Urza Sagas. If that's the route that he's going.
I think the other concern is if you let Dom get 2 constructs, he can block things effectively and not get beaten down by the endurance or whatever.
Oh, so you just wasteland the opposing Urza Saga, right?
I think that's what might happen, but I'm not sure. We'll see exactly how he wants to pursue it.
All right, so cracking the Windswept Teeth, Boston finds a Savannah. Is there any particular reason why here? Oh, okay. So I think from the black mana he floated from the Bajuka Bog, he's activating one of the stages to copy Dom's Wasteland. I guess this. I'm very curious. Is there any reason to activate the Windswept Teeth at that moment?
Yes. Because if you don't fetch first, so the quick explanation is to keep crop rotation up. Suppose you do that and then you fetch at their end step, then like you wouldn't have a window to cast crop rotation instead.
But so if that's too far in the future though, but if Boston were to just go and commit to the line, he would still have that Windswept Teeth to just use in response to that Wasteland activation, no?
Well, so the problem was Boston had a black floating, right?
Yeah.
So we copy.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Well, what if Dom just lets it go and just untaps? You know, I think it's just better to fetch first and deny the option of Dom.
I see.
It's just a timing thing.
All right. So players are shortcutting quite a bit. So I think in response to Boston copying that Wasteland, the Wasteland was used from Dom. And he went after Boston's Wasteland, and then Boston used both Wastelands to go after both of Dom's or Urza Sagas.
Yeah, a lot of Wastelands were activated in that moment.
Yeah. All right. So Dom comes out with a. Oh, sorry. And then in response to one of Boston's Wastelands, Dom used a crop rotation to find an Urza Saga. Sorry, I completely forgot about that. So this is a card that Dom sideboarded back in to put him up to 61 cards. So he did bring back in the Sajiri step. Thoughts?
Well, it doesn't look very good here, but I mean, it's not about that. I guess he was just hoping to like engineer a window where he could wage the opponent through a plow.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, it's not inconceivable that it doesn't do nothing, right? Like if Dom somehow is able to craft a Merit Lodge, he can attack through the endurance, right? Because the endurance does have reach.
Yep. I think what might actually happen here is at some point, if Dom gets a 6-power creature and Boston only has green blockers, then we could actually lethal that way. But that's a far way off because you basically would need to get a bunch more resources before your construct will become 6/6.
Yeah, and I think Dom's already gone through 2 Urza Sagas. That's 2 Urza Sagas in the grave and 1 on the battlefield. I don't recall if 1 was exiled earlier on in the game. I think he might have dredged 1 away and it got exiled.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he might have to just rely, if the game can go drag on that long, if Dom somehow finds like that's been staged to copy Urza Sagas, then that might be the way to go. Because if he does make this construct, it'll only be a 2/2.
Well, I think Dom's going to make the construct. Honestly,
Yeah,
like,
that'll be no doubt. But like
Sure.
what I'm saying is, it'll take him quite a while to get him up to 6, right?
Right.
Oh, he just plays a Sujiri step and passes the turn. Is he just hoping to use it as Elvish Reclaimer fodder?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Boston takes his draw for the turn, finds the Soul Guide Lantern.
Yeah.
Yeah, not going to do much. I think it's just going to be turned into another draw 1 at this point.
Well, you might just let it sit around to protect yourself getting loamed out on, because the bog's in your graveyard, not in your deck.
Oh, true. Yes. Forgot about that one. Alright, so Boston now sitting deep in the tank here. So his Reclaimers are 3/4s, right? I think all the stats are 3/4s on Boston's side of the field.
Yeah, I mean, if you attack, you have to attack with more than one creature, because attacking with 1 doesn't do anything. You would have to attack with 2. Then the risk is, what if Dom actually has some removal in his deck, removes your last blocker, and attacks?
Yeah.
Like, then you suddenly take a bunch of damage for basically no reason. I think it's probably just better to sit around and not do that.
All right, Boston finally using that last crop rotation, going to turn the Lush Portigo into an Urza Saga. And this is the trick that he used before. So this was before his draw step. So he searches
well, the Sagas trigger in pre-combat main, so you can do it during your draw step.
Oh, I see. Okay. Oh, yeah, because he drew that Soul Guide Lantern.
Yeah. Just a good queen play, though, is what I would say.
All right. Boston going to cast Soul Guide Lantern. Both players now empty in the hand. So, if there's any mind games, it's going to be onboard tricks. All right, so the ETB trigger is going to go after the Beseju who endures in Dom's graveyard. Going to exile that from the game. And going to pass back to Dom. Dom going to create a construct. All right. Draws a Force of Vigor.
Yeah, so that doesn't do much, but you might see Dom make a construct, then use Reclaimer to rotate away the Saga with the Chapter 3 on the stack.
Yeah, it's similar to the crop rotation tricks that we saw earlier on in the match. Looks like he's reorganizing his lands. So if Dom were to take that line of play, what is is there a best land that he can go for? Is it just was it just a Thespian stage?
It's a stage or a Saga, I think.
Yeah, I guess we'll operate under the assumption that he does have 1 Saga left, because I do see 1 in his exile. So he does have 2 in the graveyard, 1 on the battlefield, and 1 in exile. So those are all 4 of his sagas.
I see. So the land he could have gotten was Thespian stage, but you could just I'm not sure. I think I probably would have activated Reclaimer, but
yeah, like I don't think you're going to be hard casting this Force of Vigor. So I'm not sure.
So Boston's pausing because of Pithing Needle, mostly, I think.
Yeah, I think. Let me just double check here. I don't recall Boston having Pithing Needles in his board or in his deck, right? Oh, he does.
Well,
He does have one in the sideboard.
I think both of them have a Pithing Needle in their 75.
Okay, so Boston has created a construct just in case Dom names Urza Saga. But are there any other targets in the deck other than Pithing Needle and Mox Diamond now?
I think all of the equipment got sideboarded out, so probably not.
Yeah, okay.
So I think you might get Needle and just name Urza Saga, honestly. And just
Yeah,
use
that's
your
what I was
Force of
thinking
Vigor.
too.
Use your Force Vigor to clean things up. The problem is your contracts are only 3/3, so that might not be enough.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with the Pithing Needle, they would be 4/4s.
True.
Yeah, I'm just now surprised that Dom didn't use the Elvish Reclaimer to search out another land. But if he is considering getting the Pithing Needle and naming the Urza Saga, then I don't know how beneficial using the Elvish Reclaimer would be.
Well, I think it's still good to do because you're basically down one resource if you don't do it. And like,
Yeah, that's
he
true.
doesn't really have very much going on anymore.
I mean,
Looks like
so one option is that if he doesn't Pithing Needle Urza Saga, he does have the Wasteland to deal with the Urza Saga, right?
Well, I also just saw that Lava Spur Boots came back in, so I guess he changed how he sideboard for Game 5, like, pretty drastically. Unless if that's a card that looks like that but isn't actually that, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, we'll have to double check. Can't really see what he's shuffling between or what he's considering. It looks like okay, yeah. So it is the Lava Spur Boots. So he's debating between the Lava Spur Boots and the Pithing Needle.
I think the problem with is if you don't get the needle, Stage Saga might become an issue at some point.
All right. So it looks like he is trying to plan out to see if being the aggressor is worth it. Because if you're going for the Pithing Needle, you're basically playing very defensively, right?
Well, that might also be the only way that you're ever allowed to attack either. Because if you just let sagas go unchecked from Boston, there will just be constructs forever. So it's not even defensive. Yeah. I think it's just a matter of not being like out materialed by so much quickly.
Okay, so he is gonna go for the Pithing Needle. He has named a card. It is Elvish Reclaimer.
Huh. I wonder what the plan there is then. So we're just going to wasteland the saga now and prevent any more sagas coming out. I guess is the theory.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe just verbalize some lines on why this might be the play?
Well, it's not even a line thing. It's just that if you don't needle the Reclaimer, it's just so easy for Boston to get like Saga plus Stage going via 2 Reclaimer activations per turn.
I guess, is this a consequence of Dom not being able to deal with the board.
I mean, yeah, like no one can deal with the board right now, so the board is going to look like this for a while.
Yeah. But like what I mean is like if Dom, because Dom knows that he doesn't have like all of his Swords to Plowshares, and it was like a conscious choice to not bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
So he has to shut down the Reclaimers some way, and he can't just rely on those 2 Swords to Plowshares that he boarded in, right?
Sure, it's more that I think shutting down the Reclaimers actually shuts down sagas for a bit until Life from the Loam is found.
Mm-hmm. Right, Dom gonna draw for his turn. Ooh, I did not update the hand, so I'll have to fix that. Alright, finds Wasteland off of the top. So his constructs are 4/4s,
Mm-hmm.
and Boston's is only a 1/1 from what I can see, right?
Yeah, but now that the Reclaimers are shut down, a double block is very easy to make.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just like attacking doesn't really accomplish very much. If you attack with both constructs, double block with 3/4 and 1/1 on a 4/4 and 2/3/4s on the other 4/4 is very natural block. So you don't really get anywhere.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to use the Wasteland, going to go after the Maze of Ith. Looks like Boston's considering using the Thespian stage to copy the Maze of Ith.
Yeah.
And he
I
does.
think that's what happened.
Yeah.
This is why I like the infinite tokens, even not just as tokens. They're very useful for labeling things.
Yes. Yeah. All right.
Wow.
I'm going to commit to an attack.
So I guess the one good thing is if you double block with 3/4 and 1/1 onto one of the 4/4s, you can actually blow it out with the Force of Vigor, killing the Exploration as well.
Yeah. We've been seeing Dom sit on this Force of Vigor, but that's only because there hasn't been really good targets for him to go after.
Mm-hmm. So I think when the dust settles, you'll be left with a 3/3 construct and your Reclaimer versus a single 3/4 Reclaimer on the other side.
He's not casting the Force of Vigor. He's just letting the damage go through.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that.
Yeah, I would have used the Force of Vigor to get rid of the construct and the Exploration, as you said. That would leave Dom's board state significantly, at least a tiny bit better than Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Boston finds a Yavimaya off of the top, gonna play it for his first land drop of the turn. Still holding on to a Beseiju that I don't think Dom knows about yet. Dom gonna top deck a Windswept Heath, which joins the Force of Vigor in his hand. Gonna play out the Windswept Heath. Gonna pass it back.
Yeah, now not much is happening. That's why I didn't. If you're going to attack, I think you have to cast your Force of Vigor.
Yeah, at least you would have like a threat on the board, kind of trying to. I guess it can't attack through the 3/4 Reclaimer.
Or the Maze of Ith is the other issue. That's why I think I was just inclined not to attack.
I see. Mostly. Yes. Okay.
The one danger of that is, and I think maybe what was going through Dom's mind is, if you do that and Boston top decks Force of Vigor, suddenly like the race looks pretty good for him.
Yeah. All right, so Boston go to draw Exploration last turn. Gonna pass a turn. Dom draws a Yavimaya for his turn. Pass it back to Boston. Boston finds another Exploration. Gonna cast it for his turn. Passing it back to Dom. Dom's gonna draw that Lava Spur Boots. Not looking too great here. Although it does. No, it still has. He still has to fight against the Maze. Gonna play the Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth. Going to send out the Lava Spur Boots and equip it to the Elvish Reclaimer. There's no way he's thinking about attacking, right?
Well, it doesn't do much. You can just maze and pay one.
All right.
Or, yeah. Oh, Urza Saga.
Yeah, Boston top decks an Urza Saga for his turn. This is gonna break the symmetry. Alright. Just passes the Urza Saga, or plays the Urza Saga and passes its turn.
So I think Dom's going to cast the Force Vigor, killing an Exploration and a Saga.
Oh, he's going after the
he kills the
token.
Conch. That's interesting.
I mean, going after an Exploration doesn't do too much in this situation until Boston finds a life from the loam, right?
Yeah, it's just a hedge versus a top deck loam, but I guess Dom's like... I think the thought process here is if Boston top decks loam at any point, the game ends very quickly. Like, there's not even anything Dom can really do about it because all of his tools to attack the graveyard are gone.
Yeah.
And Boston has so many explorations that the wastelanding all of the lands will happen like almost instantaneously.
I'm actually curious, like, this might be the fatigue, but Dom's tapped 5 mana for this Force of Vigor?
I think one of the lands was tapped for Lobster Boots plus Equip.
Oh, okay.
That's 2 mana.
Alright, so the Force of Vigor is going to resolve. Dom going to draw a Thespian Stage for his turn. Kind of back at a standstill now. And going to pass back. Boston finds the life from the loam. Oh yeah, my goodness.
Yeah, he immediately reaches for the graveyard just to see, like, how safe is it for me to just go all in, or do I need to bog Dom this turn? Which I think you probably should just bog Dom this turn.
Yeah. So this is also going back to the importance of controlling your opponent's graveyard in the lands of your match, right?
Yeah, I think that one endurance, that one turn just broke the game open even more than I even really expected it to. It was just backbreaking, I think.
Yeah. All right. But Boston crafting his way to victory, gonna cast a life from the loam.
That's a good one. Waste Saga, huh?
Okay. So doesn't think he needs to Bajuka Bog. But what is he... Is he just trying to go for like a prison lock with the Wastelands, or...
Yeah, that takes a while, though, is the real issue. I think I probably would have gotten the Bog back and bogged Dom just to make sure. Or I would have gotten Waste Saga Bog back, played the Bog Waste Saga out, so I could have the option of wastelanding my own Bog and getting it back next turn.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, now with these double explorations, these life from the loams get way more serious. Alright, there's a Thespian Stage gonna target... Is that a Saga? Doesn't matter.
No, it was targeting Wasteland, but it doesn't really matter what you target. And yeah, that's gonna do it. It's too hard to get out from under that. That was a grinder. It really was an endurance that one turn. It just broke the game wide open. It is a good tool to have in these mirrors. It is a little bit hard to cast, but the games go so long that you are capable of hard casting it.
Yeah. Oh, that was a toughie. That was very... I don't know. For me, it was very back and forth. It's very hard to tell. It's like, thank you so... I just want to thank you so much for being here and providing the analytics, because... You know, if I was to do this on my own, I don't think I would do an adequate enough job of analyzing the board states, because I was having a lot of trouble figuring out who's ahead and who wasn't, what the lines of play, what was, you know, opportune for both players in specific and given moments. So, Jarvis, thank you so much for commentating, and I hope you enjoyed this best of 5 lands mirror.
Yeah, I'm always happy to watch Dom play. Great friend of mine, very brilliant Magic player, and I think it kind of showed in those games.
All right, everybody. Thank you for watching. Yeah, well, hope to speak to you soon.